All right, so we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. This is our March 27th, 2020 Google Club Cubase Google Hangout. We're going to, for those of you that are watching this not live, if you're watching the kind of rebroadcast, you may want to skip ahead maybe 5 or 10 minutes as people get logged in. I see we have a lot of questions already. If people want to go ahead and introduce themselves and tell us where you're from, that'd be great. My name is Greg Ondo. I'm presenting from outside Washington, D.C., in Alexandria, Virginia, in United States. So if you want to just tell us kind of where you're from, all right, and do a quick introduction, and you can enter in questions in the comments field. So we'll go ahead and let people get logged in. So we'll just, and again, if you're not watching this live, you can just simply skip ahead and we'll try to have an index of all the topics discussed in the Hangout. So you know exactly, but maybe 5 or 10 minutes, we'll let people get logged in. Okay. All right. So we see a lot of familiar faces. We hope that everyone is surviving kind of the current health scare that's out. So we realize that people have a bit more time. So we're trying to do 2 hangouts a week. They seem to be pretty well attended. So, but if, we hope that everyone's kind of learning some tips and tricks on these. Okay, so we had people logging in. We had a bunch of questions before. We just got a new email address set up. So if you want to send questions in advance of the next Hangout, we could, you can send your questions in advance if you want to send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Once again, clubcubase@steinberg.de if you want to actually send some questions in advance. So we got that email address set up this morning. So we have questions coming in, introductions. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can. Going through the indexes, right? So we only got through like the first half of the Hangout questions. So we'll try to get through as many as quickly as possible. Okay, so we see Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. We have Sweden. Amsterdam, we see. San Antonio. We have India, Hampshire, UK. Good to see Paul Brown on a Hangout. We have California. All right, so we see Stanley from Poolsville. Good to see you on a Hangout. Okay, we have more people logging in. Okay, we have Houston, Texas. Good to see you. All right, Luxembourg. We have Fort Wayne, Latvia. Okay, we have Northern Germany, Luxembourg. Ostrava, I probably pronounced that incorrectly. New York City. Good to see you, Clay. The famous Clay Ostwald, wonderful musician, producer, engineer. All right, Salem, Oregon, Atlanta, Steinberg, or I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, in Germany. Okay. All right, so we have more people logging in. We have Ventura, Holland, Manchester. London. Saudi Arabia, Finland, Japan. I think someone is probably up very late or very early in Japan. All right, so we have Denmark, Lebanon. All right, so we have Iran. All right, so more people getting logged in. Exit out of Chrome so I don't get bombarded with notifications. All right, so we have Ohio. Okay, so we'll just more people are getting logged in. We'll wait just a couple minutes as people are. All right, so we have Serbia, Rome. All right, you have Norway. So probably like many of you, I have my son is at home. He'll probably make an appearance within the 3 hours. So I'll apologize in advance. My wife is also working directly above me, so you may hear some conversations faintly in the background when she's doing her work. All right, so we have Austin, New Hampshire. Okay, a couple people from Houston. My brother lives in Houston. We have Hollywood, Florida. Been there many times in my travels. All right, still have more people logging in. Chino, California, St. Louis, Greece. It's always fascinating seeing people from all over the world get together. All right, so see comment, say hi to Ryan. He's fine if he makes noise. I appreciate it. All right, we have Greg Curtis, a colleague of mine and from Ohio. Good to see you, Greg. All right, we have Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Okay, we'll wait just another maybe minute and we'll get started. All right, Spain. All right, we see a question on panning tracks. All right, so we have Colorado. Okay, so with Germany, we'll wait just one more minute and we have more people logging in. All right, Russia. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We'll get through as many questions as possible. And once again, my name is Greg Ondo. I work with Yamaha in the United States representing Steinberg products. So we'll be going through as many questions as we can today. So, and in the future, if you want to send questions, we have a new email address. So you send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. If you want questions kind of sent in advance, we could do that. All right, so we had a question about how to set up a reference track in the control room. So let me just go ahead and I think I have a file that's well set up for that. Let me just get that open and see if it's in my, I thought it would be in my recent So this is actually a demo project. It was kind of donated by Clay Oswald, who's on the Hangout, who's a wonderful musician again. Has that magic touch with everything he does. All right, so one of the questions gets to be, how do we deal with reference tracks? Because a lot of times we may have different tracks that are visible, that are, that we're working with, and we may not see kind of all of the, and having, various configurations, so we could, as we're working with our different tracks, realize that if we wanted to have a reference track and we have a mix set up kind of as a reference, and we have effects that are going to be in our master fader here, that if we just simply load an audio file into the reference track, that the reference track into an audio file, it would go through the same effect processing here. So on this, I have an audio file that's kind of like a pre-mix of this. So I will just adjust some of the EQ so we don't have YouTube kind of flag us. Let's say I have a project here that's set up. And if I solo, let's say, a particular reference track here, let me just make sure that the busing is set up appropriately. Okay, so what we want to do to have a particular track that is used as a reference is we're going to go into our control room, and we're going to set up just we're going to go to the audio connections to control room, and we want to set up just a Q mix, and you could right click and you'll see add Q mix. I have all mine being used, and I'll just call this a reference. And what I want to do, if I get this set up correctly, is we'll just, let's say this is my reference track here. I'll just do something very different. And I want the rest of my tracks to sound like that particular reference track. So we come here. And if we unmute this, unmute my particular reference track. So what we want to do now is to, instead of sending this to a stereo bus, I'm going to route my reference track to no bus. And then from my no bus, what I want to do is to go, and we'll do this in the full mix console screen. I will just make sure that my actual rack is, I'll go to my racks, and we want to make sure that the Q sends are enabled. So once the Q sends are enabled, we could kind of set this up to do basic. So we'll come here, and I'll take this particular track, and I'm going to send it to my Q mix. So we'll just come directly here to Q. So I'll say my 24-bit mix. I'm going to route this to my reference Q mix. So we'll make sure that's turned on. And at this point, it's not being sent to the main output. So it's not being sent to our master fader, which could have its own effects. So when we play back, I could just go between the different Q mixes. So if I wanted to listen to my source, then if I click on Q mix 1 or reference Q mix, that could be our reference track, and that's all we're hearing. So this could be my mix, and then without having that audio file be routed into the master effects processing, we could just simply switch in a control room between our Q mix that's being used as a reference and the Q mix and our audio files on the system here. So that's a very handy way if you're trying to, check for levels, check for tonal characteristics of a reference file, import it into the project, send it to no bus, and then in the Q mix, make sure that we have the Q mix set up, and we could send the audio track to that Q mix, and that Q mix could it will not go through the Master Effects processing. So that should help with that. Okay, we have a question. Hi, Greg. Hope you're doing well and staying healthy. I am. Thank you for asking. How can I import a guitar wave lead solo in Cubase 10.5 and lower the key from A to E flat without the sound slowing down or sounding strange? So let's say I will come here. I think we'll maybe butcher a guitar part here. So let's say we'll solo the guitar part. Let me try. I have an auto panner on this. So what I want to do is, we could do this in a couple of different ways. One thing to be aware of when we do a transposing. So I could just kind of take this particular audio file and transpose it. So let's say so if I just select a file on the info line, we could just come here and adjust. So that's 8 semitones down. And when you do this, there will be different types of algorithms. So you may want to, depending on the source material, you could have, if it's the pitch that sounds wobbly, you may want to change the algorithm to elastic pro time. So there's standard pitch shifting, and these will be used for some operations like working with very audio or kind of optimized for particular algorithms. But play around with some of the different algorithms here. So generally time we could think of as being for more rhythmic. Pitch could be more kind of harmonic content where guitar could come in. You also have formant preservation, which could be handy for vocals. And then you have tape mode, which will kind of mimic the actual sound of like an analog tape. So if you slow down or change the pitch, if you slow down the tempo and it's in musical mode, that the pitch will change just like an analog tape. So, and it could be that depending on the source materials, something that's a big jump. But if you play around with the different algorithms, that could definitely help your performance with that. Okay, we have a question. How do I create a new library in Groove Agent 5 and save it? And how do I create a new sound in Halligan 6 and save it? Thanks. I tried asking late before, but I got here early. So, all right. So if we have a particular drum set, I'll just do switch over to a different project. And I'll activate this project. We often, we got asked this question in the last Hangout. What does this little special gold lightning bolt means? That indicates that project is currently active versus other projects that are inactive. So if we have a particular, we'll come over here, we'll load up an instance of Groove Agent. So we'll just do a Groove Agent SE, and as we work with this, I'll create, and I'll just come to my media, and we'll look for I wanted to have different audio files on pads. We could do that. All right, so once I'm here and I have my audio files in Groove Agent SE, really all you have to do is choose to export kit with samples. So if you click directly on the agent itself, try setting export kit with samples. You could put in the name of the kit. So you could say Hangout 1. You could give, different metadata that you want. So if it's, my character, and different tagging, and then, once we have that set up, we could just say, okay, and let me just see if I did it right. So it's kind of acting up on me, but if you just simply choose to export the kits, and let's take a look at Hallian, I think it will be a similar scenario. Okay, so let's go to my media bay, and I'll just drag over a sample here. And then at this point, all right, here's my son. All right, so I think it's going to be under, you could just do save program as, and then that will automatically kind of save your Groove Agent and your Hallian samples that you've created. Okay, so we'll move on. Let's see. Cubase 9 artist. Is it possible to route bus such as a MIDI track into an audio track? I see it done on YouTube. I think that's going to be a limitation in the Cubase artist. It's one of the things that's not in the artist versus the pro version. And what that would allow you to do is, let's say if I have a Groove Agent kit here, for those that aren't familiar with this concept, we could just kind of play. Let's say if I have, so what I could do is take this particular track here, and let's say if I wanted to add an audio track, let's add a stereo audio track, and I wanted to add, let's say, a group track as well. So at this point, what I could do is, sorry about that. What I could do is just take the particular outputs here, let's say of my Groove Agent, and we could route this via send to group 1, turn that on, and now on the stereo audio track that I created, we could set the input from the group. So at this point, I could hit play, I could record, and kind of just hit the, sorry, I just need that. And this way we could re-record the output of the audio directly through the group. So the audio output is going into the group. The output of the group can be used as an input on an audio track. So I don't think that's available in the artist version. That's something that's going to be in a pro version. So if you want that functionality, consider upgrading. All right, so let's move on. Okay, I have many video files. All of them are 4K and MP4 format. Some files, Cubase does not import them. What is the problem? Is there any specification on a video that Cubase can read or not? Generally, I don't think the video playback engine supports 4K. It's generally, that could take a lot of system resources. So generally you probably want to work with a standard 1080p resolution. And if you go to the Steinberg website, you could see, there's a whole page on different video codecs and containers that will work for it. But generally try to stay away from 4K videos. I don't know any composer that works with 4K videos. It's all kind of standard 1080p, and it's kind of the performance of being able to decode the high resolution video. So I don't know hardly anyone that works at 4K, so try working with a standard 1080p resolution. I think you'll be okay. Okay, so let's go through. So I see a question. Instead of having to manually draw underneath a track, panning left to right changes, is there a way Cubase can generate random left to right panning changes? So let's say if I wanted to take, Let me just find a quick audio file here. I'll just find a quick drone. Sorry about that. All right, so I'll just drag this here. So let's say, and I'll knock it down so it's not too loud and obnoxious. So, there's a couple of different ways. One is to, if we have this set up, and I'll just put this into a quick loop. I'll turn off the click. So there's an auto pan plugin. So if you come here to the inserts, you could just, I think if you go under spatial and panners, where I thought it would be. I'll just type in pan. So under modulation. So here you could just have, you can set different rates, widths, the phase factor. You could also and if you wanted to sync, you could just have it sync to, whole notes, different rhythmic factors as well. So play around with kind of the auto panning. That'd be kind of an easy way to have it automatically go, and it will work for any audio source. All right, so let's go through some of the questions. So we see, does Cubase have a built-in plugin or option that can generate random melody for piano chords that I've recorded? Nothing. I don't know of anything that would just randomly generate based on the chords you started. That would be. I've seen some kind of different algorithmic randomizing things for creating melodies. I haven't heard one that was good or musical. So I don't know of anything in Cubase. There are some different. If you go into, let's say, a MIDI track, you could have. If you go into the MIDI modifiers, you could choose to, you could experiment with maybe randomizing the pitch, and you could set a minimum, maximum values of, let's say, an octave higher, an octave lower. So, you could set up a range. Then you could also just say, okay, I wanted to, randomize the position of the notes and see if you come up with some results. But I don't think there's any magic play the piano chords and have a hit melody kind of created, if that's what you're looking for. Okay. Okay, going through. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. Okay. And question, how do I randomize a resonance filter, an analog sound in one of the Cubase VSTs? So if you have a virtual instrument, you could come here. So let's say I have a pad shop sound, and I'll just make sure this isn't annoyingly loud. So let's say if I just have pad shop, and if you wanted to, you could, and let's go ahead and open up kind of our pad shop interface. So if you wanted to control different parameters, one of the things that you could do is just kind of come over here, and as a MIDI insert, you could have an auto LFO. So this just shows up, and at this point you could say, I want to have my auto LFO, and then if we open up kind of what it looks like, we could say, I want this particular parameter. So if we do a learn CC, I think, we could set up let's say if I wanted to set this up for pan, but you could set it up for any CC parameter. So I could say I wanted my panning to automatically, carry over to half notes for this particular chord. So you could do that for, just do kind of a right click, learn a MIDI CC, and then, match that CC up with your Auto LFO plugin, and then you could have different amounts, and you could set different rhythmic values if you wanted, if you all of your available controllers, if you wanted to adjust the value range. So if you play around with that, that will probably get you there. So you could have like the resonance within a plugin. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, so just saying kind of, so with the auto LFO or just kind of having the panner, you don't have to draw in. Okay, just reading through comments here. Okay, so it says, hello, everyone. Hope all is safe. Greg, my question is it possible to do a time signature change within the same MIDI step track? So I'm not sure if I understand what the MIDI step track is, but if you wanted to put, different time signatures in, when we come here, we could just add a track, and you could do this directly from the add track dialog, and we'll choose a time signature track. And we will, as we come here, make sure that I see some people complain that they can only put the signature at the bars, and it's because the snap is enabled. So you can kind of put a time signature event anywhere that you want once you do this. So, and then just kind of enter in, if you want it to be 5/4, 6/4, you could 3/4, and you could change click patterns. So, I'm not sure what you mean by within the same MIDI step track. So the signature track is going to be global for everything, which kind of makes sense. So, but if you could reiterate that question, because I'm not sure if I understand what the MIDI step track is. Okay. So question, what is the best way to copy an entire block top to bottom and insert it before the cursor? So let me just go to project here. We're probably make a little more sense. Okay, and this could be a good use of just doing like the range selection tool. And if you're not hip to the range selection tool, it's incredibly powerful. So what we could do is just say, so let's say our cursor is here. I want to, if I hold down on a Mac, it's Command Shift. I think it's Control Shift on Windows. So you could do the arranger track on an individual event, or you could do it globally. So let's say if I wanted to take this, and I think if we go to our range, we could choose to do a global copy. And then if I just wanted to come here from the range again, you could just say paste time. And then that would... so let me just... check that again. So we'll come here. Let's say I just want to take all of that. And I think if we just do kind of a paste. Yeah, so just choose to do like a paste time at origin. That would automatically take everything that we just did and do that. So once again, I just used a range selection tool and I held down Command Shift. And I think on Windows it's Control Shift. And then I copied, and then from the range I just did paste or paste time. So and then that just did it. So or I just did a paste, and the cursor was automatically at that particular range. So give that a try, and I think that will do the trick. Okay. All right, reading through comments. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. I was just working on a project and would like to know how to load a saved template. So if you're working, so when you go to, let's say if I like this particular project here, we could save as a template. And a template's a great way as like a starting off point. And for composers, this is very critical, and they'll, build up thousands of tracks in a template so they have kind of access to all their sound. So if I wanted to save this as a template, I'll just say, okay, this will be our Hangout. Okay, so now that will be saved, and at this point, if I do a new project, if you click under More, that's where you could see all of your saved templates. So at this point, I could just simply save that. And if you wanted to kind of merge, so that's how you would do it. And if you wanted to do more merging of, other tracks, and just make sure I'm understanding about, just go through this here. You could also do an import tracks from project. And at this point, you could choose to just, import, different folders, group tracks, all these different elements could be, individually imported into another project. But for templates, once they're saved as a template and you go to new project from the Steinberg hub, just go under More and you could see your templates would show up there. All right, good to see Robbie on the Hangout from Dallas. All right, so let's go through more questions. Thanks again for everyone's great questions. Okay, it says, hi, I have a MIDI file and I want to print notation sheet. How to do? So once a MIDI file is imported, we could just simply, let me just go to, I'll jump back to a different project that has some MIDI data. So if I wanted to, we'll just select the MIDI information, the tracks that you want to print out, and I'll just go to revert this quickly so it doesn't sound awful from changes I made. Okay, so if I wanted to find, my particular MIDI file, I could just say, like here, Clay did a great job in this project of, you could just go to your score editor, select the event, and you could hit, from scores, open score editor. And you could just simply, and this is like the lead sheet very quickly of this. And from here, you could just choose to print. So any MIDI part, let's say if I wanted to, I think there's some MIDI bass in here. Let's go ahead and So if I wanted to just select this particular part here, I could hit Control R, and then you could see kind of your MIDI bass part. So you could just select the MIDI track, make sure you go to Scores and go to Open Score Editor, and then just print, and you should be all set. Okay, so it says, "Hi, sir. In MIDI keys, for example, C major and others, I want to disable." So I'm not sure if this is in the score editor, but if you were in the particular score editor part, and if you double click, like here, we're in B flat. Looks like so. If you go to the main here, you can set your Clef and Key, so you can just kind of set your key here. So I'm not sure, you know, in MIDI keys, for example, C major and other, you want to disable. So if you wanted to just not have a key, you could do that, and the program will kind of point out every accidental. So let's say if I move this to the key of C, now, like every time that there would be an accidental in this particular, or let's say if I move it to, you can see that as I adjust the keys here, the accidentals will automatically just be incorporated. So, but maybe I'm misunderstanding your question. If so, just let me know. Okay, it says, "Hi, Greg. I can solo one of my speakers in the control room, but when I use mono down mix preset, I can't seem to get my mono mix on just one speaker. Any thoughts?" All right, so I'll give this a try here. So let's say... All right, so when we go to down mix, and a lot of times your mono won't necessarily just, you can have a mono source over two speakers, but let's take a listen to it here. So if we go to down mix presets, and if I wanted to make sure that my mix was folding down to mono, and sometimes you need to make sure that you have both speakers so that when you go back that you can tell which is your stereo and which is mono. So, and I think if we go, let's say we go to our channels here. That way you could do mono. So within a control room, you'll see channels, and here you could bypass different speakers. So if you want to only hear in one speaker, hold down the Alt key, or make sure I have the right modifier. So I just click, and then you could hear only one speaker. So you can hear both speakers. So again, just kind of click here in the channels in the control room. So you could just simply, at that point, listen to in one speaker. So, and I guess you said, if I read your question, it says, I know you can solo speakers in control room, but when I use the mono down mix preset, I can't seem to get my mono mix on just one speaker. So that seems to do the mono mix when doing that. So, but again, it's perfectly fine to hear mono out of multiple speakers. What I have set up in my control room and my personal studios, I have like a large stereo or like medium-sized stereo monitors, and I have a 5.1, like an NHT set up, and I just used a center channel. So in the control room, I come here and so let's say we go to our VST audio connections. You could just add, let me just take one of the speakers away here. So I'll remove this. So let's say if you wanted to add a monitor, you could use the same monitors. And and just choose this to be mono. So I use the center channel of my 5.1 in my studio as a mono source. So at this point, I could just come here, and then when I switch to my different speakers, my monitors, this is mono, so I have like my main stereo 5.1, an alternate stereo of my left and right of my 5.1, and my center channel just as mono. And that's how I have my control room configured. So that's another way you could do it as well. Okay, going on to more questions. Okay, just going through a bunch of people. I'm still in the introduction phase. I know we're always get behind, but I appreciate everyone's patience. I hope everyone's learning a couple tips and tricks. And if you guys kind of like the Hangout, feel free to always, put a like for the Hangout and make sure you subscribe to the channel. So hi Greg, can we do glides, portamento, and groove agent? So let's take a quick look. So one of the things that's a lot of people miss is kind of some of the pitch stuff that you could do in Groove Agent. So I'll go over here to my drums. I'll just do Groove Agent SE since everyone has this particular one. Let's load a kit with some programs. Okay, so if I have just I'll go ahead and just kind of slow the tempo down here. So if I go to the instrument here, and if I wanted to do some, different, if you go to the pitch envelope here, so if you adjust the envelope amount, you could just kind of come here and you could have multiple breakpoints if you wanted. So if you wanted to even kind of do more Bezier curves, So, play around with some of the different pitch settings that you could do here. So you could have the pitch be randomized. You could also have, different controllers do different things. So, play around within there. And I think you get kind of a lot of different portamento type of effects. All right, going through more questions. Okay. So I see a comment. Hi, Greg. You mentioned to the Cubase team to fix Cubase Pro 10.512, still having dropouts and audio problems. There could be lots of variables with that. I haven't really had any problems on pretty huge projects. So, but I'll pass it on. I know they're always working on newer versions and updates and stuff. So. Okay, so we have a question. I see you are not using PadShop as a track instrument, but rather as a rack instrument with its own assigned MIDI track. Any particular reason? No. Sometimes I go back and forth between instrument tracks and instrument racks. No particular reason why I did that. Sometimes I will prefer to use instrument tracks initially or instrument racks for dealing with if I have 16 tracks that are all coming from the same source, I could have one user interface window open and be able to toggle back and forth, but no particular reason. Okay, so we have a comment from Alo. First time I got in, I want to hang out earlier without it ending right away. Thank you, Greg, for all the expertise you've. I've learned so much from you. That's great. That's why we do these hangouts. Make sure you're kind of getting the most out of your tools. Okay, it says, greeting, Gregs. How can I edit vocal track while recording like Pro Tools? Okay, we had kind of interesting. I had a big PBS radio station in Boston area kind of asked a similar question of how we could, and often their kind of use case was they get the broadcast maybe several minutes ahead. They get to feed several minutes ahead of the broadcast, and they need to do edits. And they use Ondo, but they wanted to do editing while recording, and they're just kind of looking for a way to do that. And we could do this, and what we came up with, a way that kind of worked pretty well for them, was in preferences. We just want to come over here. You could see that when you go to record audio, you could have an audio pre-record second. So this could be just a buffer. So I will go ahead and let's say if I was recording and I don't have my microphone hooked up into my audio interface. So imagine a beautiful waveform. So we could just start recording. Okay, and then what they would do is they would punch out. I'm going to change it from re-record mode. Let me just turn that off. So I'll just set it to punch in, punch out. Okay, so when we come here, we could just start recording. And then let's say if I punch in, punch out. Now, since I had that particular, so let's say I'm doing this, I do a quick punch in, punch out. Let me punch back in again. Sorry, let me get this set up right. Okay, so now that they've done that, you could just kind of roll back while it's recording. So I could edit this and adjust, but you could take the other recording and just kind of roll it back within the 1 second. So once you kind of punch out, that's kind of a unique audio file. But here we had our punch out, and we do this. All you have to do is, and you could set it, I think, up to 1 minute, but you could have 60 seconds of pre-record. So you could just select that recording and just kind of roll it and be able to roll it back to where it was. So once again, if I come here, I'm recording. And now I wanted to just edit, let's say the start of this file back, and I could do editing while the audio is still recording, because you always have that buffer to work with rather. Okay, so going through questions. Okay, so I can see a question from Alan McKay. I was wondering when Steinberg is going to do an update on VST amp rack for us guitarists. I haven't heard of plans for it. We have a lot of people that are very happy with the current version. I know even kind of famed record producer and kind of hard rock producing icon Michael Wagner has always considered the included VST amp rack the best software guitar amp. He has many guitar amps in his collection, so it's a pretty high words coming from him. But I'll pass it on and see if there's anything in the works. If you have particular feature requests, please feel free to send them to me at clubcubase at steinberg.de, and I could pass it along. Okay. So Andy Price, I think we covered this in the last Hangout, and I just jumped way ahead in my feed here. Sorry, I'm just going to jump back. Okay. Okay, so, and we covered this a bit in the last Hangout of from any way to sync track selection from arrangement to multi-track to multi-audio mixdown track list. So there currently isn't. So we'll just try it again here. Let me just jump to another project that may make sense for this. So. Okay, so I think what they want to do is if certain tracks are hidden, that that they, if selected, that they will show up as being in the export audio mixdown window. And the last Hangout we did a little bit of how to, like, with the Project Logical editor. So I'm not sure if we had it figured out or not. So let's say our media type is equal to audio and it's equal to MIDI, and the property is set to event is selected. And I think what I was trying to do is see if we could do this to disable I think is see if it was under and we're trying to run this with a macro to disable tracks. So let's see if we do this. Okay, so I'll try to undo that function here. Just revert. So there isn't a way to do that. And I will see if I could experiment around with this, but I think you might be able to do something like if these tracks are selected. So I'll try this and where we can see what I'm trying to do is to take the selected tracks here and maybe disable the other ones. So we'll just try. So, but I don't think that there's a way to do that, but I can understand kind of the need. I could play around and see if I come up with a Project Logical Editor preset. Okay, so, and speaking of the last Hangout, we had a question about how to properly, in the chord track, we'll just kind of cycle back before I forget. So someone had, within, I'll just do a new project quickly. And they wanted to do a C flat fifth chord. So, and it would always show up as an 11th, like a sharp 11th chord. So I was in touch with the developer this morning, and he shared a tip. So if we go to, if you want this to be a C flat fifth, like we see here, and not a C sharp 11th, if we go to under event display, chords and pitches, we could set up, create custom chords. So you want to check the fifth, flat fifth, sharp 11th, and that the chord has a major third. And you'll see that by default, it will be a sharp 11th chord. So in type, we'll just simply do this as flat 5, and then this will now show anytime we have a flat 5 chord, it will indicate this way as opposed to a C sharp 11th chord, which is not as typical. So again, go to the preferences, and under event display to chords and prefixes, you'll see, make sure that we do a new custom chord and check the 5, flat 5th, sharp 11th, and the major third, and then it'll be able to be displayed as the C flat 5 chord. Okay, so we'll move on to other questions. So I see a question how my son is doing. He's doing well despite being kind of cooped up. But he's doing great for someone in first grade who's been mostly home except for a quick bike ride every day outside. So thanks for the question. Okay, will it ever be possible to synchronize Cubase to Cubase? I don't know if you're talking about synchronizing, like running both programs simultaneously and running them in sync. But you're probably, I don't know of a way of doing that, but you can take your Cubase project file, and through the Cubase project file importer, import that directly into Cubase. Okay, so we have a question that someone's having problems getting difficulty getting chord names to show up in my score editor. So let's take a look. I think we may have a project that we could use for this. Let me just check. All right, jump here. So a couple ways. If you want the chords to automatically be generated from a particular piano part here, let's say this part, what we could do is if you go to your project and go to chord track, we could say create chord symbols. I generally leave the top 2 checked, and at this point it will automatically populate. So if we undo that, we'll see the chord track will automatically be populated. You could kind of do the same thing within the score editor. I'll just take it to kind of the full score editor. And it has a very similar function if you click on make chord symbols here. But if we have the chord track laid out, you could go to your scores menu, and under advanced layout, you could just say show chord track, and the chord track will now automatically be put directly into the score. So give those little tips a try and see if that helps you. All right, so we had someone from Bosnia checking in. It's great. Okay, so we have a question: when comping audio, can you loop a section selected by the comp tool without switching back to the selection tool or range tool? Okay, so let's just open up kind of a comping example. Okay, so let's say I have some comped audio files here. Okay. So I'll just grab my comp tool and I'll do some comps here quickly. Okay, so I'll just read through the quick question. Okay, can you loop a section selected by the comp tool without switching back to the selection of the range tool? So something, if I select, let me try this. Let's say I select this particular range and hit P, doesn't, let me try just selecting. So I think what you want to do is to just, without having to select the event, to be able to kind of set the loop. So it doesn't look like a way to do that. Something that you can do that may not be as obvious. So I think what the question is kind of asking is that they have to kind of go here and then they could set the loop by hitting the letter P. But if you're doing this, something that could be an interesting, if you hold down the command or control key, you could audition each of the different comps. So if you want to quickly find and then just click, so there's different modifier keys that you could listen to each take. And then just simply select with the same tool, just holding down the modifier key. But that's a good use case of being able to just kind of loop that particular range without having to switch tools. I'll try some of the other modifier keys. So we can split, we can slide. Yeah, so I don't know a way to set the loop, but try holding down the control or the command key. Then that will switch to just allow you to audition each lane, even though it's not actively selected. So it may help in kind of that scenario. Okay. Okay, so we see a comment from Tim in Mission Viejo. Thanks for all you do. You're welcome. We're glad that everyone's liking the Hangouts, hopefully, and says, tell the software engineers great job on Retrolog. I'll definitely pass that along. Thanks for the nice comment. Okay, is it possible to add custom values to the Media Bay attribute character or create a custom multi-value attribute? I'm not sure if you could do, you could do a custom attribute, but I'm not sure if it's like a multi-attribute, kind of like some of the built-in ones. So we'll show you how to do this, and this may help. So if I open the correct window, that would be helpful. So we'll open up Media Bay by hitting F5. And if you go, a lot of people miss this one, but if we come over to the little setup window layout, we'll go to the attribute inspector. So here, a lot of people say, I want a, let's say, I'm looking for, a keyboard, and then I want an electric piano, and you could kind of just filter out different conditions. And sometimes people go a little crazy, and it's like, I'm looking for a techno mandolin that has distortion, and we'll set up conditions that, don't make any real sense. But so be aware of that, and you could just simply kind of come here and reset all your filters with that one mouse click. As we want to create a custom attribute, so make sure that you have the attribute inspector here. And then you'll see this little configure defined attributes. So at this point, you could click on the plus. So there's lots of attributes that have already been pre-made for most musical and most post-production scenarios. And then you could search based upon these particular attributes by selecting them in the Media Bay categories here. But if you wanted to make your own, click on the little plus sign, and you could choose whether it's a yes, no option, a number, or text. So let's say you got like 18,000 drum loops and you like 13 of all the drum loops you bought and you really like those. You could actually make an attribute that says like sucks. So you could say, find every audio file that I said that doesn't suck, or, I'm looking for. So you can make your own kind of user attributes. It's not necessarily a character thing, but it is something that you could search by and just kind of see your particular, user, and it would come under various, and you could just have your own attributes defined to search through. So if you really want to, be able to dive in and find your different sounds or presets quickly. Okay. So question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to move all plugins in inserts to direct offline processing? Also, ability to convert all direct offline processes to real-time plugins and keep the original wave untouched. So what I do is, let's say I'll come here and I'll just quickly, let me destroy another audio file here. So I'll go to my media and we'll jump home. Okay, so I have this particular file, and let's say I have, multiple inserts on this particular file. So we'll have this, and let's say I throw a delay on it. I have an EQ, so let's just come here and say, okay, I want it to... I wanted to throw, an auto pan, since we discussed that, and let's say a phaser. So I have all these as my plugins on this particular track. So what I want to do is to be able to quickly load all those into an offline process. So, if we select a particular event, we can now go to your audio to direct offline processing. And we could add, different processes and different plugins that we see here. But one of the things that was added, I think with 10 or 10.5, is the ability to take like a series of plugins as inserts and be able to just simply drag them there. And if we have auto apply, that's automatically applied all those plugins to that particular file. And if I wanted to now come here and we could choose to bypass the inserts, this will now play back and, through that same effects chain of inserts without these having to be active. And while many people would consider this kind of a destructive process, at any time I could say, I could, 10 years later, I could say, let's just delete the graphic EQ. And I wanted to change the settings on the auto pan to be synced to, a quarter note triplet instead. And that will reprocess it. And you could simply just come here and at any time also just, 10 years later say, okay, I just wanted to delete all of the settings. And at this point, I could reactivate those inserts. And if those inserts aren't being used, like if they're VST3 plugins, they're not taking any CPU resources. So hopefully that should cover that for you. And the original wave, unless you specifically tell it to freeze all of the processing, will always be intact. Okay. Okay, why aren't there nodes for velocity also? A way to lasso or rubber band velocity nodes in the controller display would be great. So let's go ahead and just enter in some notes quickly. So I'll just switch this over to okay. So let me just reread the question again. So okay, great. And there's kind of a follow up. For example, a hi-hat to be able to quickly select only a group of notes with certain velocities and adjust them without affecting other notes at all. So you could do this quite easily. Kind of, let's say I have my velocity range here. The velocities are going to be tied to the individual notes. But if you wanted to, you could, easily kind of do logical editor presets where we could say, I want to select notes. And then we could set, within a MIDI note message, you have type value 1 is pitch, value 2 is velocity. And we could say select notes that have a velocity inside the range of 45 and 100. So at this point, I could, just come here and I could just simply select those particular velocity ranges. And some other cool things that you could do is, once you're here, you could also, if we select, you could scale the velocities just once they've been selected. You could also kind of just tilt the velocities as well. So if you want to do stuff like that, but you could just kind of set up a condition, but there aren't really nodes, but you could do it quite surgically with, using the logical editor, and people will have, different presets, and you could call it presets and assign user assignable key commands. So try that. It may not be as direct as other systems, but I think it'll probably give you better results. Okay, scrolling through more questions. Thanks everyone for great questions. Okay. Okay, so hi Greg, is there a way to free warp multiple tracks together with group edit, for instance, drum tracks? So if you're doing kind of correction, there isn't like we don't have kind of like a multi-track warping on a project window, but some of the things that you can do, especially with drum tracks, if you're looking to tighten up drums. Let me jump to a multi-track drum project here. Okay, so let's say if I have, I'll just hide that. So I wanted to, clean up drums. Let me enable these tracks here. So if I just kind of go through and find my hit points appropriately. Okay, so now I've found my hit points. I'll put these into like a group edit. So we could assign those to a folder, and within the folder do group editing. And then under the quantization, we could just come here, in the upper, just to the left, to the right of where you see the quantizing value, and we could see our values here. So at this point, we could say I wanted to roughly quantize to 16th notes, and we have the audio warp mode here. So I could choose to quantize, kind of using the audio warps. So I'm going to go ahead and select the event. So I will now, so I could do it by slicing or by using audio warp here. And at that point, we choose just to kind of quantize the events, and that will stretch the events. Just kind of, let me set my priorities a little differently here. So let me set my snare, and let's say my hi-hat. So we kind of give kind of a priority setting for that. So now we will come here, and there you could just kind of choose the audio warp. And if we don't choose audio warp, we could quantize, and that will, we could slice our audio events into like a zillion little slices. And then you could choose to quantize. We could choose to, or do audio warp. And then, if needed to, you could do crossfades after. So you could do it for kind of cleaning up drum performances quite well. But it's not where you could select multiple events and do audio warping on the main project window. I think we'll see it coming. I'm not sure when. Okay, question. Is there any tricks to make tempo detection more accurate? Because in some song it doesn't work well, especially if there's no drums in the middle of a song. One of the things to be cognizant of is, let's say if I do tempo detection, so let's say I'll just take my kick track here, and sometimes I have some projects that are problematic with my computer, so let me just try tempo detection here. So go to my project menu. All right, so if you have a section of a song where, like, the drums drop out, it will always, after doing the tempo detection, it puts you into the time warp tool. So if you find areas where, it's like, oh, okay, this is where, and I'll just shut off my divide track list. At this point, you could just move the measures manually. So, at some points, if you have like a song and all of a sudden the drums completely drop out and it's just a synth pad, it may not be able to, figure out exactly what it is, depending on what you select as a source. So it will always default to the time warp tool, and the time warp tool will allow you to take the measure, and you see the time warp tool, you're kind of in that mode when the top timeline is brown, and you probably want this to be in bars and beats, and then basically you say, this is where measure 21 is, this is where measure 22 is, and every time that you move this, it will automatically do a recalculation from that point on. So if I adjust something, it will now just quickly recalculate the tempos after that if needed. So, the tempo detection does a great job. Obviously, it's not going to catch every single file. If you're holding down, one chord for 8 bars, it may not figure it out without something rhythmic going on. But that way you could, it places you into the time warp tool, so you can use that in those cases just immediately. Okay. Okay, it says, question, I've just built a new computer. Is it possible to export and reload in the new computer all preferences, key commands, color, VU meter, etc. from Cubase and old PC to the new one? Yeah, one of the things that's often overlooked, if you go to the edit menu, you could go to a profile manager. So just do a new profile, give it a name, and this is all of your settings. You could save it to, like a Google Drive. I know people do that, or they'll save it onto a USB flash drive, and then just simply export that, and then on a new computer, import all your preferences, key commands, all that. Your settings for metering colors will all be translated. So again, to transfer your all of your user settings, just simply come here, go to edit menu, profile manager in your old computer, export, go to your new profile manager on the new system, and import. Okay, moving on. Thanks for all the great questions, everyone. Okay, so next question. How do you balance out a MIDI instrument audio and have it come directly back into Cubase as an audio file that can be further manipulated? Okay, so let me just jump to this project here. So this is what, there's a number of different ways of doing this, and I often see people complaining that, I wish we had a multi-bounce or multi-freeze. But let's say if I have, particular parts here, I'm going to select, let's say, these parts right here. And then if we go to your edit menu, you could just go to render in place. And here we could have render settings. We could choose to have them be dry if you wanted the channel settings, which would include the EQ, inserts, and channel strip, or if you wanted the complete signal path, which adds effects like your send effects or the master effects. So at this point, I'll just say, okay, let's just keep it dry. And now I could choose to mute the source tracks. I could also keep the source tracks unchanged. So I could just say render. And if I have files selected here, it'll just automatically take that, and it's going to even extract the color. So you can see that the original parts were muted and the new parts were just rendered as audio files directly into the system right there. So you see the original MIDI, it's now, and if you do it on a track by track basis, so let's say if I come here, we could just say, and depending on what is selected, so if I have the track selected, I could go to my render in place. And as we do this, I could just say, okay, let's go to my render settings, and I could choose to disable the source tracks or just remove the source tracks. So let's say I want this as separate events. So let's say I have like these two parts here. I'll just say render. And we can see that we'll take this MIDI part here. It's going to render it as audio. I could do it as one long part or to match the same parts that we see here. And again, it's going to take those, and it's now automatically turned it into audio. And at that point, it got rid of the MIDI file. So you could even do that if you want, or just have the MIDI files be muted. It's really just kind of your different settings that you have within your render in place. And you get more options if you have the track selected, and you get the first two options if you have a part selected. So just be aware of that. So those are some great ways of being able to, turn your MIDI into audio and free up resources. Okay, going through questions. Okay, so hi from Iran. How can I pan the specific frequency? So I'm not sure if it's doing, when you say pan the specific frequency, if it's an audio frequency or the frequency or speed of the panning. So we'll take a quick look. So if we wanted to pan only specific frequency ranges, what you could do is have it set up. You could set it up as a send effect if you wanted to. So let me add an effects send channel. So I will come here. So if I only wanted to pan particular frequencies, this is something you could try. And my son is knocking at the door. All right, so I will start off with, say, maybe a frequency EQ. Okay, so we'll come over here. I'll say frequency. And on that particular effects channel track, I'm going to have... so if we go to our effects channel tracks, we'll see our frequency selected here. And what I want to do is click on the edit channel, and now we could adjust under modulation. There's the auto pan. So we could say in this particular EQ, I wanted to solo, let's say, I wanted a range, and I think we could solo the individual bands. So basically it's only going to process the frequency. Let me just see. Okay, we might have to do this with a multi-band compressor. So let's just try that. So if we don't add any... So here you could only solo particular bands. So I want to solo just this particular band of frequencies, and then that will process through the auto pan. If I'm completely overthinking this and you just wanted to adjust the speed of the frequency of the auto panning, you could adjust here, and you want to see it in musical values, you can just kind of click on the sync, and that will sync to the project tempo. So if you wanted to only auto pan particular frequencies, try running an effects end with a multi-band compressor where one of the bands is soloed, followed by the multi-band. And if you wanted to adjust the frequency of how fast it's panning, just adjust that within the auto pan. Okay. Okay, reading through questions. Thanks again for everyone's great questions. So it says, I have a Focusrite 2i2 and Asus Essence STX 2 card, both with ASIO drivers. Is there any way to use them both at the same time, for instance, as QMix or perhaps external effects sends? So I'm assuming if it's an Asus Essence card, that it's probably... I'm not sure if that's an audio card or a video card. So generally, no. And, I know some people always think, oh, great, I could have multiple devices, multiple interfaces connected and kind of build up my, a modular stack of I/O that's available to me. And you could kind of do it on Mac with aggregate devices, but it's not really, it's not the most advisable thing because the latency can get compounded. So the reason why is just because, to keep both devices synchronized, if they don't have a way of kind of feeding off of the same clock. So both interfaces would be kind of, running independently of each other. And that's just kind of a bad situation to be in for predictability of delivering files and playing audio back. So it's advisable just to get an audio interface that has the right number of inputs and outputs, and to kind of err on the side of more, because you could use them for a lot of different things. So it wouldn't be advisable. I know some people will do like an ASIO for all and be able to run multiple devices. All right, and my son is banging on the door outside. So, all right, hang on just 1 second. All right, I'm back. All right. So, going through comments. Okay, so it says, why the colors of the exported video looks different than the original sometimes. Sometimes looks really bad quality, same as there's missing color, so the whole video looks red or blue after exporting. I've done a number, probably about 20 or 30 different video exports, and I haven't run into that. But if you have a file that you could share, I could, possibly send it on to our team and take a look at it. And you could send me a link at Cubase at Steinberg.de. Okay, so we have a question. Can you explain the functions of the workspaces? Okay, so when we want to set up different kind of pre-known points of windows and views that we want, we could use workspaces for that. So if I wanted to come here, and there's two different types of workspaces. We have a global workspace that will be available for any project, and a project-specific workspace. So if I like this view, I could come directly here, and I'll just call this, let's say, auto pan. Okay. And then we could call this up by hitting Option and number 1 on the computer keyboard, and the numeric keypad. So now I wanted to come here, and let's say I wanted to see this in my score editor, and we'll switch this to page mode. Okay, so now we could click on Okay, so now let's say if I'm just back and I'm in my mix console and I wanted to go back, I could just say, here's my auto pan settings, and quickly just come here. There's my score settings. So it kind of allows you to store kind of pre-existing scenarios that you've set up that you may want to quickly go back and forth from, so you don't have to constantly open and close windows. So if I come here, I could just hit Option 1, Option 2, and at that point you could just simply navigate very quickly to different views using workspaces. So once you kind of get them set up, it's very fast and handy. I know some people use multiple monitors, and some people have kind of gravitated from like 2 or 3 screens to one big television. That at that point you could just simply, have with a couple mouse clicks different views all set up. All right. Okay, so all right, so we see Tony Ray Jones on Hangout. Hey Tony, how are you doing? Hope your family's doing great. And we also see Paul Brown. Good to see you. All right, so we have a question: is there an easy way to render those as an audio track like I do when I hit Control Shift R to render a MIDI track. And I think this goes back maybe, let me just, it says I'm using Superior Drummer 3 for a track, but I'm using Superior Drummer 3's internal song track to house the MIDI parts. I haven't worked with Superior Drummer in a while, but I think if it's not in the project window itself, that Cubase, won't be able to access and render patterns or your song structure in Superior Drummer. So it may have to be actually within the Cubase environment. But I think I have an old copy, I could experiment a little bit over the weekend. Okay, we have a question. Is there an importer or a way to bring in projects from 10 years ago that were done in Cubase 5? Now I have Cubase 10.5. Old days, I had a dongle on an old computer, but now I have a USB-E licenser. And it could depend. So 10 years ago, we were probably on, Cubase. So it was Cubase 5. So, from version SX, and I believe, if memory serves, that was around 2001 that Cubase SX came out, and that switched from the Nuendo, that switched from kind of the, code base that had been started on the Atari platform, and then when Nuendo came out, Cubase SX1 in 2001, that's when that new code base came out, and with that, the file format changed from like a song or arrangement file, a .all or .arr in Cubase VST5, and this is released in 1999. At that point, that used .all and .arr files as the projects. So Cubase 5, not VST32.5, still uses the .cpr files, and those will just simply open up. So I have projects from SX1. I just did a project from SX2 in my studio recently that I opened up without any problems. So those file formats are the same since about 2001. If you have the VST32 Cubase 5 before SX, before the whole generation switch, and you need to import a .all or .arr file, you can simply, if you go to the Steinberg website, you could download, the last version that did that was SX or SL3. And you could download a version of SX or SL3 still to this day, import the .all or .arr file, and simply just, save it, and then you're good to go. So your Cubase 10.5 license will run previous versions. So you could run, Cubase, SX1, SX2, SX3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all on your Cubase 10.5 license. So if it was from 10 years ago, it's probably Cubase 5, and those files should just load right up. If it was from about 20 years ago with Cubase VST5, that's when you would need to download from the Steinberg website a Cubase SX or SL3, import the files there, and save it into a .cpr file. Okay, so question, searching for an easy way to copy an automation track. All right, my son is back knocking on the door, so hang on just 1 second. Sorry about that. All right, so his movie finished, I think. All right, so searching for an easy way to copy automation to a track. So let me just duplicate this track here. Let's say I have automation. So if I wanted to, select, let's say, move this, I come here and I'll just copy. And let's go to the next track, select, and paste. So you could just kind of copy and paste the automation, and kind of where it inserts it is, just make sure that you don't move kind of like the playhead position, because that's what really determines if the automation, but you can see that's going to be the same automation from that particular track to another track. So copy and paste seems pretty easy. If you need to do a different way, just let me know, but I think that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so I see a question on VST Transit. I haven't worked with that as much as I should. I'll try to have an answer. So the question is, would it ever be possible to edit each other's tracks on VST Transit? It won't let you edit tracks from the other user. There could be. I'll play around with it and see if I could come up with an answer. I don't want to just kind of go through and kind of waste a bunch of time, because I don't think I would be able to find the answer, and I don't have the license on my particular computer now. But maybe on Tuesday's Hangout, Vince will be able to do it. All right. So seeing a comment that love these Hangouts, keep them coming. We're trying to do about 2 a week. All right, so social distancing and self-isolation is so hard. Yeah, we're trying to make sure that, during this time that you'll be able to, learn some of those features in Cubase. We know it's an incredibly deep program. So, all right, so let's move on. So we want you to be able to get the most out of your investment that you made. Okay, so we have a question. Keep very audio segments from moving after resizing. Reanalyze only a small section of very audio without bouncing. Copy very audio suggestion. Invert the light and dark colored lanes. Very confusing. All right, so let's just take a quick look. I'll just kind of render this particular track really quickly. I'll just go to bounce selection. So just okay, so let's look at this in very audio. Let's take it into the full screen view. All right, we'll do the analysis. Okay, so let's see. So it says keep very audio segments removing after resizing. So let's say if I resize. Okay, reanalyze only a small section in very audio without bouncing. Copy. Okay, so when you do very audio, it's going to do the entire audio file, so I could pass that along. And then very audio suggestion, invert the light and dark colored lanes. Very confusing. I think if you wanted to, you could go into the preferences. So we see kind of, I see where the dark colors, like the black keys are actually a bit white and the white keys are black. So that's, I understand that point, but we may be able to resolve that if we go into the user interface, and let's go to custom colors, and let's try to go to the editor area background. So let's just come here. So let's try just double clicking here, and I'm just going to move this all the way up. So now you could see the black keys are darker than the other ones. And for some editing, I still kind of prefer this. But again, so for the last point, if you want it to be a lighter scale where the black keys are darker, go to your preferences, to user interface and custom colors, and in the editor area background you could just move that kind of straight up and hit OK. And then you could just be doing, you could do it like that. And, if you wanted to go back to where it was, just go to defaults, and then you could go right back. So you could change that last point. But so think of the file as automatically doing, but I haven't run into problems like resizing, moving after resizing. So, okay. Okay, I bought upgrade 10.5 elements, and now all my plugins became sort of big. I ticked the high DPI, but that did not work. Is there another way? Some of the plugins will be scaled for high DPI. It could also depend upon your, on a Mac, you get some like really goofy stuff with resolutions, in my opinion. So if you go to, your display, let me just come here, you get like these really, so let's say if I go to my normal, I could say default for display, and I probably just screwed this up. All right, so let me just scale that again. So, you could change, your adjustments here, so the Mac is kind of cryptic. You have like small, medium, large kind of, but it doesn't actually give you the full resolution. But probably if you have the high DPI switch, that you're probably on Windows. But in some of I'm not sure if it's all your plugins. Sometimes the plugins have to be set for, high DPI, and there's not much we could do about that. So you could contact third-party plugins, but let me know if it's all plugins or just like third-party plugins. Okay. Question. Can you explain about VST Connect? I want to connect to a friend via net to work on same project now. Yeah, I was just doing a project last night in VST Connect. So if we have a file here, and it's really hard to get it set up, and we are working hopefully in the next couple days to have a pretty detailed tutorial on it. So if I wanted to, first I will go to my audio connections, and I just want to get rid of a couple. I'll remove some of my cue mixes just to show you a point here. Okay, so what VST Connect will allow you to do is to, record someone remotely who's in a different location. They could download a free software called the VST Connect Performer from the Steinberg website. So you go to the VST Cloud, and there's a VST Connect SE, which will allow you to record up to 2 tracks at once, or you could do VST Connect Pro, and I think that's $199 US price, and it could be different in other countries, but that will allow you to record up to 16 tracks and MIDI. So we'll come here and we'll go to VST Connect, and we will just simply do a create VST Connect. And this will, I don't have my webcam, I have my laptop screen closed, but you would see the person, you could see the person there. You would log in using your My Steinberg credentials. And then, once you're logged in, you could search for friends. So I was working with my friend Mark. You could send them you could find users. So if you're looking for particular people, you could also, and then once you have them as a friend, you could connect directly to them as a friend. And then, once we kind of set up your VST Connect, it will add our performer recording track and what we want to do. And it's going to add our cue mix for the VST Connect here. So this will add kind of our headphone mix. So what I want to do is we can go into kind of our full mix console. And we want to make sure that in the racks, we have our cue mix, our cue sends turned on. And now we could go to like our cue sends, and I will just kind of select all the tracks here. And what I want to do is to just kind of right click here, and I want to, in the control room. So what we need to do is to actually send the cue out to them. So we're going to say use I want to enable the cue sends, and now I want to send kind of a more me headphone mix. So at this point, I want to use the current mix label or levels. So once we've done that, this can now go directly out to the performer. And if you want them to hear a click track, turn on the click track directly from there. So once we have that all set, and at this point, we could just hit record. The signal will go out to them. You could communicate with them directly over the webcam, and this would also set up like a talkback. At this point, let's look at the editor for this, and now we could enable the talkback. You would see them on the video screen, so you could have kind of a separate video window that you could turn on and off here. And once you're connected, you just hit record. The mix through the Q mix goes out to them. They'll hear it in time. They record. All the latency is compensated for, and you could just record that person directly into your system. So play around with it. Some things to be aware of. I think you want to turn off the monitor here because you may hear an echo. Make sure your constrained delay compensation is off, and try to give yourself, because if you start recording right at the very beginning of the project, try to give yourself like a measure or so, because there is some latency involved that has to be compensated for. So, give yourself like just a little bit of pre-roll for the transmission of the audio from your system via the Q mix to them. And then, allows that to get in sync. And then you could just record and talk with the person and see them, and use your talkback microphone. And I have one configured, but you could just use a mic into your audio interface or talk on a phone or over the webcam if you wanted to. So that's kind of the basics of it. And again, we're working on getting a tutorial. It's very tricky to kind of capture all the screens on both ends and have that, but we're getting it sorted out. So look for that, and hopefully next week we should have it done. So. Okay, so Alo had asked, I also have projects from my Atari 1040 ST. Any tips on how to import those to 10.5? Would really appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, just about 5 years ago, I did a big kind of mass importing of Atari ST discs from the kind of noted guitarist and amazing guitarist Alan Holdsworth. He still had his Atari set up until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And he, and we just took them into, we took the floppy disk, and you got a USB floppy disk drive, connected it to the computer, and he had all of his formatted on a PC formatted floppy disk. Took all the floppy disk, put it in to Cubase SX3, saved it, and he was able to migrate all of his older Cubase projects from his Atari. So you could definitely do it. Just you need the secret is to get SX3 or earlier, and you can get that as a direct download from the Steinberg website and start converting your projects. Okay. All right. Do you know if Steinberg have in mind to incorporate networking in future Cubase updates similar to FX Teleport, simply using new CPU power from other computers? We could do some of that already with VST System Link. So that was kind of an older system, and we're kind of seeing, less and less of a need as the computers are getting so fast, and a lot of I haven't heard FX Teleport in maybe 10 or 12 years. So, it's not to say that they wouldn't, consider something like that, but it's always difficult to kind of keep everything, you know, in sync and making sure all different things are working. Obviously a lot of composers will use something like, Vienna Ensemble Pro to host VST instruments and, running multiple, instances of multiple computers of Vienna Ensemble Pro. So if you watch some of the Junkie XL videos, how he works with his Cubase and how a lot of composers work. But there are a lot of issues that can arise from that as well. And then so something to be cognizant of. So I wouldn't rule it out, but a lot of people have kind of migrated. They're running multiple systems, especially large composers, to running like a VE Pro rig. Okay. Okay, so going through, thanks everyone for great questions. All right, so we've gone about 2 hours, so it just seems like we got started. Okay, so question is, hey Greg, is it possible to, let me just, okay, sorry. I used to be able to rewind and fast forward with my mouse and scroll wheel, left and right click. No longer works workaround, or it no longer works in Cubase 10. Is there a reason or a workaround? So let's see. I mean, I'm not sure if you used a left mouse button to. Let me just reread this. Used to be able to rewind and fast forward with my mouse, scroll wheel, left and right click. Let me just see if that's a preference of some kind. I'm not sure if I ever recall that functionality in Cubase. I'm not doubting it. There's lots of functionality I don't know, but I don't remember that, and it seems like something I would have known. But let me just see if maybe there's some settings under transport. Yeah, so I don't recall that functionality. Maybe if other people could chime in if they work the same way. But I don't recall that, but I could do some research on it. If you want to email me, Craig, I could see if I could, we could get it figured out. Okay, question. Hey, Greg, is it possible to fold the MIDI notes from a drum pattern and unused keys disappear in a MIDI key order, drum editor? It's less confusing. All right, so let's say if I have... all right, so let's say I'll just come here and we'll add part, and I'll do some of my wonderful beat programming capabilities here. All right. So we'll look at this in our key editor, or drum editor was a question. All right. So let's say, we have drum sounds hidden down here. We go way down. There's drum sounds here, and they're all kind of spread out. We want to see them all on one screen. So if in the drum editor, if you click just to the left of kind of the link project in Zoom, you'll see this little pop-up window, and just click here and you say show drum sounds with events, and it will hide everything that doesn't have an event. So at that point you could just choose to show only drum sounds with events, or show all drum sounds, or the ones that are in use by the instrument. So, but just simply say show drum sounds with events. And I think that'll take care of it for you. All right, so I see a question, need to purchase educational editions, please guide me how. So, any number of our dealers can sell educational versions. So, I'm not sure where you're based, but in the US, there's, just about any dealer. You could also go to the online shop from Steinberg and be able to purchase. You may have to prove, there may be requirements of, a verification for your educational order, but once you kind of do that, it shouldn't be a problem. So, but it's very easy to buy the educational versions from dealers or from the Steinberg online shop. Okay, just going through. So, question: how do I stem huge film score templates with thousands of tracks, particularly with VE Pro or tons of contact plugins? It's really kind of the same way you would do, any stemming. So let's come here. I'll just do a new project. All right, so say I'll just add some different instruments. Okay, so if I'm here and I just wanted to, send these to different groups. So, I know some film composers will, let's say I just come here, we look at our mix console, and I could say, okay, I want to take these 8 retro logs. So I could just say, okay, I want to add a group channel based on the selected tracks, and I could have my retro log group. I could have my strings group. Just right click, add group channels to selected channels, and we could, just kind of come right over here. And if you only wanted to see, my group channels, you could do that in different views. So I know, I think I was at Christoph Beck's studio working with his assistant, and I think how they have their set up, and I think they're in the middle of Frozen 2 when I was visiting them last, is they had groups and groups and groups and groups, and then they have a final group before the master bus, and that way they could just do kind of internal print throughs. But really just, building up your different groups. I think you could have 256 groups. And, I remember doing a presentation kind of going over stuff for people at Remote Control Productions at Hans Zimmer's studio. And, someone's like, oh, I really needed 260 for a project last week. You need to add more. It's like, so, but you have a number of groups, but you could just select them and send them to groups, and you could have the groups kind of coupled directly here. You could have different mixer views where all you see is groups. If that's an important thing for your workflow, you could do that as well. So give that okay. Okay, so I see a question about tweaking analog bass lines to randomize resonance. So again, let's say if I come here to just find a quick Okay, so let's say I want this, and I'll just do a quick learn CC. Okay, so while this is playing, let me just do a horrible bass line. Okay, so, and let's put this into like a loop. All right, so let's say if I wanted to just take that particular, and this is where I could do my auto LFO. All right, so we'll just come here. And I'll just put this on the MIDI monitor so I can see what I assigned it to. I think there's a better way of doing this, but all right, so I'm going to say on our auto alpha, I have this responding to MIDI CC 28. So on my auto alpha, we'll set this to quarter notes and we'll put it to CC 28. And if I, so now the auto alpha in quarter notes is taking controller type 1, controller 28, which is this is responding to, and tweaking the resonance. Okay. So yeah, you can do all sorts of great stuff with the auto alpha MIDI plugin. So okay, so I think you say a question about copying automation tracks. I think we covered that. Okay, so let's see. Question from how to write automation while not playing the song. So let's give it a shot. Let me just add some audio tracks here. Okay. So depending on the mode, and I thought that there was a way of doing it. It could be maybe a Nuendo thing that might allow you to do it, but depending on your control surface, you know, I think you have to kind of touch the fader to write the automation. But Sinatra, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, I will play around with that some more and see if there's. But it looks like kind of in touch mode, at least has to kind of touch the fader. All right, so we had a question. Can you demonstrate how to use arpeggiator, Arpachy? Certainly, let's take a look. So let's say we have this patch here. I'm going to turn off my talkback. Okay, so, and this is another one of, there's, you know, Apache 5, and this was kind of like the older, and, you know, and I did a Q&A video on both of these recently, but you could just kind of come here and say, I want this to be eighth notes. And you could say, I want these to go up and down, or just down and up, or up only, down only, random. And you could also say, I want, let's say eighth notes, but, or quarter notes, but And you can say I want this to be within 2 octaves. So, and then, what's interesting is, so once you have that done, you could also come here and just hit record directly on the MIDI plugin itself. So instead of just playing back, let's say if I hold a chord down and hit record, it'll record just that chord that I held down. But if I go directly to here and enable the Apache and hit record there, it'll now just record the result of the arpeggiation directly into the sequence as well. So, very powerful. And again, it's all kind of tempo synced as well. Now, when you get into, there's the Apache SX. And what the Apache SX allows you to do is to actually take a sequence and drop, let me just open this up and put it to always on top. So I could just take any sequence and, drag and drop the sequence into it. And so I could use another MIDI part as the basis for that particular sequence. So play around with them. They're both a lot of fun. And again, there's a kind of a whole dedicated tutorial just on Apache and Apache SX and on the Cubase Q&A video series I did. I think the last range of ones. So look for that, and it gives you a little more detail. So question, how do you set up Cubase to zoom in and out where the mouse pointer is instead of the playhead? So I think it's going to be kind of based on the playhead, but you could also zoom just by, if I want to zoom in a particular location. What I do and what I miss in every other program, especially like, when I do video editing, is the ability to just kind of, if you move the cursor in your main timeline, I could zoom kind of right here and I can navigate as I zoom. So I just hold down my left mouse button in the main timeline and you see it kind of turn to like 4 compass points and then just move and navigate. So that's how I kind of prefer to do zooming. I find it very fast, and even in word processing programs, I want to do that. So, and other editing programs, and just get irritated every time I can't. So, okay. So let's see. Okay, so it says, second question from Mima G. How can you extract, filter out specific element of an audio track, frequency range, levels above, below a certain threshold, etc., and send it to a plugin? And again, it's like we had set up, and this question may have come before we did that, I realize, but if you run it after something like a multi-band compressor, and then you could isolate particular frequency ranges like that. Okay, so see a question, disable tabs in Inspector from collapsing. Please explain the printing option in setup. So I think one of the, sorry if I'm misunderstanding, but if you always want particular functions, like let's say I want to see my fader and inserts. So if you want, you could come here. One of the things is you could just kind of come directly here and pick and choose like which functions you want visible as inspectors. And I could be totally going the wrong way here in this particular question. Let's say I want to see inserts and fader always. So when I come here, I will come here and say, okay, let's have inserts and fader. Okay, so I want that, and if you hold down Control, you could kind of pick, and let me just go to Setup here, and I could move my fader on top here. So if that is a higher priority to me, if I'm not always using 16 inserts, so you could hold down, you could see that. And I believe if you come here and choose to pin these, and let's say if I have other functions here, I could just simply, let's see if I did this right, that you could pin particular inspector tabs from opening. So you can play around with that. So, when you go in here to the setup, and I think it could depend upon what type of track you're on. So I think I switched my track type that I was on here. So let me just, but play around with that, and then explain the printing option in setup. I think, when you go, and maybe when you go to the printing option, that would be for the score, to print out the score, I assume. So, okay. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Okay. Hi, Greg. Are there any third-party sources for color palettes in Cubase Pro 10? I know people that are sharing them online, and the ones I think are shared mostly, like when we come here, let's say to your project menu to project color setup. I think by default it may show up like this, and you go to your colors, and people always want more colors. So if we go to the project color setup, go to your presets, and you can say, number of basic colors, switch that to 32. Number of color tints, you could do 4. And now you could just hit apply. And now when you go to access colors, you'll have a pretty big palette to choose from. So you may not have to, and I think a lot of the ones that people share are kind of basically just done like that. So, okay. Okay, I had another question. My projects never show the key. Is Cubase supposed to do that? You can, the key isn't necessarily a part of the project, but if you have a chord track, so if I come here and we add a chord track, you could set kind of the scale. So if I come here, let's just say, okay, I want it. We'll add, so say we do something in D major, that you'll see kind of the key indicated here. So, but Cubase won't automatically do that because it doesn't necessarily know. We don't want to assume that, you're doing a major versus the relative minor versus the relative mode based on that. So, but, so that's something, that you could do from the chord track. Okay, question from Clay. Now that you're looking at score, there are so many spacing offset options, but there doesn't seem to be one for rehearsal, letters, or marker names. Am I just not seeing them? I'll take a quick look. I haven't worked with that in a while. So let's jump back to project with some scoring. Thanks everyone for great questions. Let me see if I could figure this out maybe from staff settings. I think it might be. Let's see if we can look in here for the rehearsal marks. Okay, I don't see it in the spacings, but I could do some research and find out. And let me just see if there's anything in here. I don't see anything in the spacings for the rehearsal marks, but I'll do some research on it and find out, Clay. Okay, so question, is there a way to name multiple track versions at once? For example, if I wanted to duplicate versions for drum editing, can I rename all of them, edit at once? Is this a logical editor preset? Let's see if we can figure it out. Okay, so I'll just do quick recording here. Okay, so let's do. Okay, so I'm just gonna. Okay, I'm just gonna do new. Okay, so I'm just gonna. So now we set up our track versions. Okay, can I rename all of them? Edit at once. Is this a logical editor preset? So I think, I mean, maybe I'm not sure if I'm misunderstanding. Let's say just rename it that instead of version 3. And then just go to track versions to rename version. let's say hang out. So it looks like that's renaming it. Is there a way to name multiple track versions at once? So I'm not sure if it's multiple track versions that you want or multiple tracks within a track version. So it says, for example, if I wanted to duplicate versions of drum editing, can I rename all of them edit at once? So it seems like doing the project, and let me know if I'm misunderstanding, but just to track versions and rename the versions. That seems to kind of do what I think you want to do, but I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding. Okay, it says, hi, Greg. How do you export a mixdown in Cubase 10.5 Pro? So let's say if this was our project, a very exciting one, generally put the left and right locators around it, and the left and right locators will indicate the start and end point for the mixdown. Go to your file menu to export audio mixdown, and we could choose like single, and we could just choose your stereo out, give it a name, where you want it to be saved to. Let's say from desktop, save, and then just export the audio file. That's really all you had to do. Okay, so I was just seeing a question. Greg, thanks, man. I really appreciate these Hangouts. Could you possibly tell us when is the next scheduled Cubase Hangout? Thanks. So we're trying to do them every Tuesday and Friday while, during the, current situation where many people are at home. So I'm usually a guy that travels, flies, 100,000 miles a year, but obviously my travel schedule has been adjusted. So that's why we have more time to do these Hangouts. So that's why we're trying to do about 2 a week, whereas a lot of people are, looking for information and getting into their Cubase more. So we want to be able to do that for you guys. So we're trying to do every Tuesday and Friday as a regular schedule at the same time. Okay, so it says, after I record chord pads to a track, is there a strum feature I can use to nudge the MIDI in that fashion? There are a couple of things you could do. So let's say if I have block chords, just add a MIDI track quickly here. All right, and let's say we come here. Okay, so, and we have a number of notes. So if we grab our line tool and hold down the Alt key. No, let me just get the... So here's something you can do. There's a trim tool, and if you hold down the Alt key and the trim tool, Alt or Option key, you could just kind of stagger. That was not helpful at all. All right, so let me just... So at this point, you could just stagger like that. So a lot of people will do kind of different patterns like that. That's one way of simulating it. Within the chord pads themselves, so let's say if we have chord pads and you go to, you could say, okay, I want it to go to like a guitar player, and you could have patterns. And what you could actually do is kind of drag and drop patterns. So if you have like a, an already existing, pattern that you do like, you could actually just kind of take the player modes and have it trigger patterns. And you could see this. I did kind of a pretty extensive video on using this with different patterns. Some of the layouts may have changed in the newer versions, but the functionality, if you go to the Cubase Q&A. But, also check out kind of the trim tool. So, okay, so... Okay, while in Groove Agent, is it possible to import a group of outsourced samples at the same time? So yeah, so let's jump back to this project here. So here I have, let's say, an instance of Groove Agent in this project and let's say if I wanted to take a number like a multi-mic'd event. So I'll just take my snap off. So let's say like I wanted to import these 3 kick drums to a pad. I could just drag and drop multiple samples to one pad, and if I wanted to layer those, we could do that as well. If you have loops, you could have those automatically spread across. And let me just see if I have multiple pads selected. I haven't tried this. Just trying to... So I know you could do multiple samples on one. There may be ways to have it automatically spread across multiple to multiple pads, but I'm just kind of blanking on it now. Okay. Okay, so question from hello Greg, how to add different effects to different events in the same track. So there's a couple different ways. One is, people will often automate different parameters. But let's, but another way is kind of using just the built-in, like direct offline processing. So I will activate this project. So let's say if I want to do some stuff with the vocal. And I'll just revert this quickly. All right, so let's say I'm... So let's say if I want to take that particular phrase and I just wanted to put a quick delay on it, I could just go to my direct offline processing, select that clip, and let's just do a delay, and I want it to be a mono delay. We could choose to, and I want this to be, let's say, a quarter note delay. So now we could just come here. You wished it all away, and I'm left. And you could choose to add tails if you wanted to. So you could come here and say, okay, now I just wanted to do a plugin, and let's do a studio EQ. And I just wanted to call up preset for, let's see if there's like a phone preset or telephone. So now as we could have our horrible delay that we processed here. You wished it all away, and I'm left So those are some easy ways of doing it. And the benefit of using this is I could come back and say, oh, I want this to be, a half note delay, and I wanted to give it 500 milliseconds of time, and I could change it. You wished it all away, and I'm left here for 1,000. So those are some of the things that you could do. But once you're in the direct offline processing mode, you could select each different process here and remove at any time. So it gets to be very flexible. So you could just, go right back because the original file will always be stored. Okay, so let's say we had a question. What is the best and quick way to copy some parts of an audio event to another empty track? So let me add an audio track here. And just holding down the Alt or Option key. And depending on, how you move events, so I could move that and place it here. And let's say if I accidentally moved it in time, there's ways of constraining the direction of edits. So, if I come here and I moved the event up and down, I think it's if you hold down. And this works for MIDI stuff too, so I'll just quickly add a MIDI track where it's a little. So it's really just kind of that easy to do stuff. But if I just take my snap off here. So if I move this event down first, and then I hold down the Alt key, we can see that the Alt key will copy. But now, depending on the direction I move first, I can constrain the direction by holding down a Control key or a Command. So now, if I moved it down first, I can't move it in time. And if I move this particular track in time first, now I can't move it on the track. So you could make a copy by holding down the Alt key, holding down Alt, holding that down plus the Command or Control key will constrain the direction. And the direction that's constrained is based on the first direction of movement from the part. But that's really easy to kind of copy events. Okay, or this, okay, yeah, so let's take a look. While in Groove Agent, is it possible? Okay, we did that one already. Okay, so let's read the question. How can I sort my VSTIs? I've tried moving, say, my EasyDrummer.dll to somewhere else, but it still shows up under Other, which makes it a bit disorienting with many VSTIs. You could go to the Studio menu and go to the VST plugin manager, and you can make your own collections. So at this point, you could just say, click on this little plus sign, and we can say, let's make an empty collection. So you could say, my faves, whatever you want to call it. And then you could say, I want to go to my VST instruments. So you could have separate collections for VST instruments. So say drums. And I only want to see Groove Agent and Groove Agent SE. And if I wanted to, I could put these into a folder. So I'm going to come here. I think if we click here, we can just say, so we'll just call this drums. And then I could actually just move those in. So now I could have that as a preset. So when I go to my VST instruments over here, I only see the drums. So, and then you could just toggle back and forth between your default, which would be all of your plugins, and just kind of your drums. So you could have that saved so you could organize your plugins. We know a lot of people do the Black Friday deal where it's like all of a sudden you purchase 50 plugins for $50 and you use 3 of them and you still see 47 of them, or they're in the really weird folder. But just simply go to your VST plugin manager and that should do the trick. Question: is there a mastering setup so I would not have to use a secondary software for that? Many people do master in kind of a traditional DAW multi-track, and if you do a new project, you could. There is a stereo mastering template to start with. We also do make WaveLab, which is a pretty phenomenal wave editor and mastering program as well. So we try not to duplicate, because it's really different workflows. So some programs I think have tried to migrate to two, but they're really very distinct workflows. So many people would prefer to have a dedicated mastering tool for delivering to multiple formats and printing CDs and stuff like that. So you could definitely process the audio very effectively using the stereo mastering template, but also check out WaveLab as well. So okay, can Cubase 10.5 import an audio wave file of a piano and convert it to MIDI and show chords? And can import guitar waves and convert to MIDI? Currently, we only do monophonic conversion of audio to MIDI, and I've played around with a lot of different multi-track stuff, and it's very iffy and it doesn't work well for converting it. So maybe in the future we'll see kind of more reliability as the techniques advance, but currently we're only doing mono files because that kind of is the only thing we could get like kind of true reliability with. Okay. So see, question, thanks for the hangout, and hope everyone's learning a couple tips and tricks. And if you're liking the hangout, please feel free to, give it a like in the thumbs, and give it a thumb up and subscribe to the channel so you're always kind of aware. All right, can Cubase, and it's kind of a follow-up on the previous question, can Cubase separate audio mix into separate MIDI tracks, drums, bass keys, etc.? No, it's not really, and nothing will really do that. Okay, so we see another question about copying automation between tracks. So we covered that. Okay. Okay, sorry, I just advanced downward. Sorry, I have lots of questions. I just advanced way down by accident. Okay, so key commands is so important. Please cover this, how to import or export from other DAWs. There's no, not a lot of programs don't allow you to change the key commands. So, and it's something we actually did originally for Stevie Wonder because he would, he's a longtime Cubase guy and he's always, would come up with something, I can't do this non-visually. Can you add a keyboard shortcut? And then, I remember Rob Arbitier, who's worked with him for a number of years, he once said, anything that's better for a blind person is better for someone who can see as well. So there are a number of different key commands, and I've seen people that have actually sold them online. But if you get to your edit to key commands, you'll see different presets available from different programs, but a lot of programs can't export them, so there's no file to import. So, but we have users that have kind of created their own. So you could import just to key commands, or you could actually migrate it directly to and save it. And your key commands are also included directly within directly within the profile, as we mentioned earlier. Okay. Okay, question. What benefit is there to using Dorico with Cubase? Is there any direct integration between the two that makes it more powerful than Sibelius or another notation program? Currently, we want it. I think the intention of the design was to make sure that, Dorico, when it was first coming out, we wanted to kind of get all of its kind of core features, like it initially didn't come with chords, it didn't come with, percussion notation, it didn't come with guitar and fretted instrument tablature. So it kind of has all those different functions. So some of the benefits are, one is it shares the same video engine. It also shares the same audio engine. So between the two. So when you do something, you're going to hear the same engine between the two. So now that we've seen kind of Dorico, be, turn into a very, very mature product incredibly fast, I think we'll start seeing, more moves towards integration between the two. And I know there's a lot of discussion going on, but we didn't want to necessarily do that initially because we wanted all the core functions to be implemented. But I think you'll see some very exciting things coming. Okay. Okay, so we're seeing what does the HMT actually do? Let me see if I probably don't have a project, but the HMT, and we can see this in the project setup. Let me see. I do. So we'll give it a shot here. So her mode tuning allows you to work with the tuning of different instruments for that could be, with different tuning scales. So generally, going back to Bach days and, the Well-Tempered Disclavier series was, not all, in early music, not all keys were in tune for many instruments. So they eventually came up with equal temperament, and that's a compromise, and it's not mathematically correct, but it's what people have used so that we have an equal division of notes per octave. And if you're wondering where the HMT is, you could actually see it directly in the project setup, which you can access from the project menu or hitting Shift S. So, but if you actually see a string ensemble, like an orchestral string ensemble or choral ensemble, they often will kind of gravitate towards more, they'll kind of change the tuning by themselves to, as a group, to be more kind of a pure temperament, so more in tune without those compromises that are fixed on an instrument such as a piano. So her mode tuning allows you to do subtle pitch corrections and like pitch shifting to simulate the capabilities of working with different temperaments. So let's listen to, see if this... Okay, so the first example here will be equal temperament. And we'll listen to like a clarinet, oboe, bassoon, and bass clarinet together. And when we do this, just listen because you may hear certain chords that will be out of tune. So you could hear kind of the waving going on. And those notes are all kind of set in equal temperament. Now let's listen to her mode tuning, which is going to change the tuning slightly on each note so that more of the chords are in tune. Especially the third chord and the seventh. So let's go ahead and play both of those together simultaneously and hear what it sounds like. So you could definitely hear kind of the pitch oscillating between the equal temperament and the her mode tuning. So if you're trying to do like very accurate orchestral mock-ups for string parts where the musicians navigate and will play more pure temperament as opposed to equal temperament when they're playing together, is like a really good ensemble will. That's what the her mode tuning will allow you to do. All right, so question, how can I use guitar pedals as outboard mixing gear in Cubase Pro through the Steinberg UR22 Mark II? So you could go, sometimes the guitar pedals could be a little tricky because their impedance could be a little off, and it's often not line level, but here's what you could do to try. And generally it helps if you have an interface. I know with your UR22 Mark II, you have 2 inputs and 2 outputs. So once you have the sources in, you could go to your audio connections in the studio menu and go to external effects. So let's say, you have we'll add an external effects, and let's say I want it to be mono in, mono out. And we could just call this like, boss pedal, whatever. Okay. And at this point you connect the output from the UR22 into the pedal, the output of the pedal into the input of the UR22. So you just kind of do a loop. At that point, you can go to an audio track, and we will say, under inserts, you could just say, let's go to external plugins, and now you could see, that boss pedal. And when we do this, that could impose a latency in the signal path. You could just click on the plus sign, click on this, and that will ping and compensate for the latency within the signal path. But so give that a try. It's usually helpful to have more inputs and outputs for routing to external effects, and you may run into instances where the impedance kind of going line level out into the pedal. Sometimes the guitar pedals aren't set up for that gain structure. Okay, so any plans on Steinberg giving drummer and producers choices in different cymbal types, chinas, splashes, crashes, etc.? Yeah, so there's a number of different expansion packs. So for instance, if I wanted to go to Groove Agent SE, we could load up just a quick kit here. Like a great one to get is may not don't think, but so let me just, all right, so one of the kits that you should really check out if you wanted a lot of those other cymbal choices is the Simon Phillips drum kits. Check that out because that's an amazing. I thought I had it installed on this. Let me just see if I have it in the full Groove Agent real quick. Okay, so let me see. Yeah, I don't have it installed, but check out the Simon Phillips kit. And that will give you, that's actually Simon Phillips's kit that he sampled himself. And it's a wonderful sample library addition for Groove Agent. Okay. I know we're running slightly out of time here. I appreciate all the questions. And again, if you want questions, just send them in the future in advance. You can send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, just going through some of the comments and questions, and thanks everyone for wonderful questions. I hope everyone's learned a trick or two. Is it possible to set up keyboard shortcuts to switch between two mix console channel visibility configurations? Let's take a quick look. You can, I'm not sure if this would apply to the mix console, but you could try these different visibility configurations because these can be synchronized between the main project window and the mix console. So try setting these and go under channel and track visibility. And I think because they will be synced that it might be able to control the mixer as well. Okay. Okay. So question, can you show some panning options, especially how to get them in a mix context? So let's say if I add a stereo audio track here. Okay, so when I go to my audio here, we could see like on a mono track, I could place it within my left to right panning options. And on a stereo track, there's some other options. So if you kind of click directly here, you could actually say I wanted to have a balance panner, which is the default. But you could also choose to have the combined panner. And here, if you hold down the left mouse button and move it up or down, you could kind of change the width and be able to kind of position it directly within the stereo field. So just some quick tips. Okay, I see a question. I'm a Cakewalk user, but I'm interested in Cubase. Wanted to try the free LE to give it a try, but cannot get past the download access code. Any help available? Well, generally, the LE version is generally not free, but it comes bundled with different hardware options. But if you go to you have to create a My Steinberg account. So go to steinberg.net, create a My Steinberg account, and then enter your download access code, and it should be pretty straightforward. Okay, so I see a question from Taylor. Good to have you on a Hangout from Pine Grove. How do you tempo detect from a MIDI or instrument file? Never tracks accurately when I do it. I've had good luck with different MIDI files. Let me see if I have. So I just select it and I go to tempo detection here, analyze. And again, like we discussed earlier, you could just simply, even within the editor, you could just simply have that automatically show up and do different. If you needed to do something like the time warp tool to make that work, you could do that as well. Okay, so let me just open up project here. Didn't like my tempo detection. Okay, we'll go through a couple more questions. See, comment, my voice is very low. Yes, it is. It helps my son fall asleep when I read stories to midnight. Okay, so question, how can I send external audio and feed it back into Cubase 9.5 Elements? I have a Scarlett 1820, thanks. What a lot of people do, in the bigger versions, so in like Pro, you have the control room where you could have an external input. Here, what a lot of people do is just have an audio track and just a stereo track, and they just put it into monitor, and if they're afraid of it kind of getting in the way, you could just kind of go to the visibility and hide it, and that way you could always kind of hear an external source coming in. All right, so just go through a couple. I see a question about drum programming. We may not have time to really get into that. We're going to try to wrap up here in a couple minutes. But if you ask me for the next hangout, or if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. We'll do it for the next one. We have a little more time. Sorry about that. So quick question. How old is my son? He will be 7 next week from Monday. So, okay. Yeah, he's in first grade. So he likes hanging out in the studio. All right. So, can you show us some, so drumming. So we'll try to do that next time. Some drum editing tips. Okay, so we will end on this one, but we have a question. Arrangement allows song sections to be chained together. Is there a way to use arrangements to incorporate subtle variations, or would it just be something like verse 1, verse 2? So if I wanted to create an arrangement track here, and what the arrangement track will I do? Say, okay, this is verse 1, verse, chorus. You could define different sections of your song. And let's say when we go to inspector, we could label these, intro, verse, chorus, etc. Hold down the option key and click. Something that a lot of people miss is the ability to have just like a little subsection and a subsection within a subsection. And now you could, if we wanted to just we could build our arrangements and make a new pattern-based chain that will play back, in different sections. So, think of it not as just a verse and chorus, but you could say, I just wanted to add these two measures again. And once you have kind of this chain, at this point with the arranger track, you could see the length. So you can say, okay, this arranger chain is 2 minutes, 43 seconds. So I need it to be 2 minutes. I need it to be 30 seconds, 15 seconds. But at this point, we could activate the arranger track, and you could choose to, basically flatten the chain, and that would take the non-linear arrangement that would jump around and copy it around. So try defining different subsections as well. So, and you could get some great things and great tips and try out different arranger ideas quite easily. All right, so we've gone about 3 hours and 10 minutes. I'm going to have to go hang out with my son and relieve my wife of watching him. I want to thank everyone so much for participating in the Google Hangout. I hope everyone has learned a couple tips and tricks. If you've liked the Hangout, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe to the channel. We'll try the next Hangout. We're going to try to do Tuesdays and Fridays at the same time. And, if no one shows up, we'll kind of scale back, but they seem to be very popular. We know a lot of people are kind of isolated at home, and we hope that everyone stays safe and healthy. And it's a great time to kind of catch up on a lot of things and learn a bunch of stuff on your Cubase. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Look for, if you subscribe to the channel, we'll have a meeting announcement hopefully up by tomorrow, but we'll look at Tuesday. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to get to everyone's questions. We tried to cover a lot of different information here quickly, but I appreciate everyone's patience. Thank you so much, and we hope that you've learned a couple tips and tricks, and please stay healthy and be safe, and we'll see you on the next Hangout. Thank you.